Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Triple Double Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Smith, and I'm joined this week by my brother, Kyle. With only 2 days left in the NBA regular season, we figured it'd be a fun time to break down the playoff matchups as they stand today, and give you our thoughts on what we're looking for in each matchup, along with some predictions on how we see things playing out. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So, Kyle, only 2 days left in the regular season. First and foremost, are you excited that this regular season is coming to a close?
I couldn't be more excited that this regular season is coming to a close because it felt like the last quarter of this season has dragged on exponentially.
And for me, it happens like every year where it's right around that game 70, 72 mark where the basketball almost becomes unwatchable, where it's just...
There's no stakes.
Yeah. And I don't even know if, like, some people argue, like, shorten the season type of thing, but I don't even know if that would really help anything because teams would probably just come to the same thing, like, 10 games earlier, just like game 62, you know? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know what the solution is, but as I said earlier, we'll move on to the playoffs and the matchups and what we see happening here. So there's 2 days left in the regular season, so these are subject to change, but we're just going to go off of how things stand right now and if the season were to end today. So since you're the guest, do you want to start with Eastern Conference or Western Conference?
Let's do the West. We'll save the East for last because I feel like that'll be the more fun conference.
Save the best for last.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll start with the 1-8 matchup, and then we'll work our way up to 4-5 because I think those tend to be the more exciting matchups in the first round. So as things stand right now, 1-8 would be Warriors versus Clippers.
Clippers fell to 8. Okay.
Yeah. Right now, it's actually them and the Spurs are tied at 47 and 34, but the Spurs have a tiebreaker, I guess, over the
margin
Thunder.
Between 5 and 8's been really fluid. It just bounces around.
And the Thunder are 47 and 33, so they're just a half game up in the loss column. So that's why these things are subject to change these last 2 days.
Yeah,
but
of course.
it's a super tight race. So any overarching thoughts when you hear Warriors Clippers?
Sweep.
Yeah. This is going to be an easy one.
Yeah, honestly, I think there are a few teams at the bottom of that Western Conference seeding that could give the Warriors a game or two. I think the Spurs would play a really good game at home. I think if the Thunder ended up falling all the way to 8, which they've been really fluctuating the last couple of weeks, I think the Thunder would give the Warriors a run. They'd give them a game, maybe 2.
Mm-hmm.
I like this Clippers team. I like the direction they're going. I don't think they get a single win.
Yeah, I think maybe if they hadn't traded Tobias Harris at the trade deadline, they would have more of a shot in a series like this. But given the state of their roster, it's actually they've had like a really impressive year when you think 47 and 34 with what they have. A lot of young players on that team. They're like, it's like they were thinking about a rebuild, and then their players just kind of outperformed everybody's expectations. It's been impressive.
What a lot of teams lack, for lack of a better term at this point, is a pecking order, and the Clippers have clearly established they know where the ball is going in the big moments. It's going to Lou.
And Gallinari
gets to just rape the paint, and it's Gallinari who's been healthy, which is the biggest story of his season. The fact that he's healthy. If he stays healthy, the Clippers, they've got a go-to scorer in him.
I actually heard Doc Rivers talking about how after the Tobias Harris trade, it actually kind of helped their team improve because of that very reason, where now in late games they know like which closers to go to, that they're going to go for Lou Williams at the end of the game, and where it's like before that they might have been too much of a committee where nobody wanted to step up and say like, all right, this is my team right now in the fourth quarter.
A bit of overpassing, no one willing to take that leap.
So I thought that was interesting.
Sure.
I would completely agree with your sentiment. It's going to be a sweep. The only thing that I think would be interesting is to see like what shenanigans Pat Beverly pulls, because every year it's something with this guy.
Yeah.
So he's going to try and get under Steph's skin somehow. We'll see if it works or not. Probably won't. But
I think Steph is cool enough to not let Beverly, really take him off. I think unless Beverly pulls something really dirty and goes to take out his knees, like a la Russell Westbrook, I think the thing is Steph's got Draymond to back him up in those scenarios. So Steph doesn't even need to bark. Draymond will do all the barking for him.
Yeah, I would say I'm more so concerned with like an injury standpoint, where
Oh, yeah.
he did it to Russell Westbrook
With
in the
Steph,
playoffs
you
that
can
1
never
year.
not be worried about an injury, but
Yeah,
he's had a clean slate of late.
so hope for the best. Moving on to 2-7, as it stands today, we have the Nuggets and the Spurs, and for me, this is actually one of I think this could be like the best matchup series wise for Nuggets first round because they're just such different styles of play. I think this could be really entertaining
I
from a
think it
viewer's
would be one
perspective.
of the best first round matchups without a doubt.
I could honestly put the Nuggets on upset alert if it plays out like this.
I'd say of all the first round matches, it probably has one of the higher percentages of chance of upset. I'm still picking the Nuggets pretty handily, but I could easily see it going 6 games, maybe even 7.
Yeah, we'll see. Like, it'll be a great matchup to see Jokic defensively against the Spurs, who play big, very traditional, fundamental basketball. So that's a place where
They
you
play
might be
big,
able to
but they don't
expose him.
attack the paint as often as a team that size technically should. So I think if the Nuggets, who have played pretty good defense this year, not as good as they did last year, but they lock down in times of need, if they can defend that mid-range attack from San Antonio, I think they'll fare pretty well because that's really where San Antonio to this day gets the bulk of their scoring.
Yeah, I mean, DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge are their 2 leading scorers, so
Exactly.
it definitely makes sense. It'll be interesting. That's one that I'm definitely more excited for. I guess I would pick. I'll pick the Nuggets in 7 because they have the home court advantage right now, and I think that could be a huge factor. But like I said
San
earlier,
Antonio plays really good at home.
I would not be surprised if this series went 7, or even if the Spurs happened to pull an upset. It would not stun me in the least bit.
Me either.
So moving on to 3 versus 6, as it stands, would be Rockets versus Thunder. I would love this matchup.
Me too.
Personally, if the Thunder versus either the Rockets or the Jazz in the first round, I'll be really happy because
I would certainly prefer the Rockets. I
me-
want to see Thunder Rockets first round more than anything.
I love the whole James Harden aspect of it. There's that clear storyline going there where obviously James Harden got traded from the Thunder to the Rockets.
Nothing would make me more thrilled than to see the Rockets sent home in the first round.
And the Thunder are a team that they're not scared of anybody in the Western Conference. They might not be the best team, and they probably aren't, but they play like they think they are.
They're
and that's
built
huge.
for the playoffs. They're big. They're
Mhm.
aggressive. They play defense. They get a lot of points off turnovers.
Yeah. And someone like Russell Westbrook, he's scary. Either way, he's scary. He could either shoot you out of a playoff game or he can just take over a playoff game. And
I think the matchup of just Paul versus Westbrook and George versus Harden is a matchup of great potential.
very exciting.
They almost cancel each other out in a sense.
Who would you pick? If
I would
Came
pick
to
the Rockets in, again, 6 or 7.
I would
But
go Rockets in 6.
I would say the Thunder have as good a chance, if not a better chance, than the Spurs to upset.
I agree. I don't know. There's some. I feel like the Rockets are gonna pull it out, but it's another one of those things where I would not be surprised whatsoever if the Thunder were able to pull it off.
It would take Paul George and Russ Westbrook's best games,
Yeah.
and if they're
that's where
capable of stringing together a couple good games, then
Well, that's where I'm scared because Paul George has not been playing his best basketball lately.
he's
It's
also been quote unquote hurt,
yeah,
and
nobody knows what's going on with his shoulder. It's a
yeah, it's
mystery
been a
to the entire
mystery.
league.
So we'll see. I think the Thunder are also just kind of taking it easy with him leading into the playoffs because they know how dependent they are
But-
on him at this point.
But that's what I'm kind of surprised about. As you know, in my fantasy league, I have Paul George, and they've been playing him every single night. It's not like they're giving this guy rest, where a lot of the league right now, they're resting their superstars, even if it's like
Yeah, but
they're in a playoff race, obviously, but they're insured to be a top 8 seed. It's really just seeding within that.
If
I
you
think
just
it would
look
be
at-
more important to get him healthy.
If you look at the type of effort he's putting out right now, it almost just seems like the standpoint of the organization is stay out there, keep your rhythm, stay loose, but you don't have to put 120% effort into every play like you have been all year through your MVP race.
Yeah.
At this point, our seeding is pretty much guaranteed. We're going to float somewhere in the bottom half.
6 to 8.
We're not going to get home court advantage. So what we got is what we got. We need you healthy and, try and stay loose in the meantime.
Yeah, it's interesting. I hope that he's healthy for their sake because he's been extremely exciting to watch this year. But that's going to be a big factor in my eyes, probably the number one factor in how that series turns out.
Surely.
Moving on to 4-5, last two teams here in the Western Conference, it is Trailblazers versus Jazz. The Trailblazers are the 4 seed, so they would have home court advantage here. This would be a really fun series, I think. How do you see this going? I don't
It's
really have a
interesting
feel for it.
because the Jazz have played really good defense against opposing ball handlers this year.
Yeah, point guards.
They've point guards, shooting guards, whoever's the main toter of the ball for a said team's offense. They've defended pretty well, and against the odds, Portland really shouldn't even be able to put up a fighting chance with all of the injury that they've underwent recently.
I think they need McCollum back. I don't know what his status is.
But they don't
as
just
of
need
today.
McCollum back. They need him operating at near
Yeah.
100%.
I think their hope is resting him this last month it's probably been now I'm hoping that he's back at that level because they need him to be competitive in this series.
And no slight against Donovan Mitchell or Rudy Gobert, but I think Dame Lillard is the most impactful player in that series.
Easily.
I think he has the ability to just take over any single game, and for that I won't count them out. Had it been a fully healthy Portland team, I might have even taken Portland in round 1.
Yeah.
I think with the injuries that they face of now, I would probably put that as a 7-game series leaning to Utah.
Yeah.
I think Portland will scrap. I think they'll get a few games, a few home games.
They're not going to want to get embarrassed again this year. They're going to come out with the fire to not be swept again like they were last year. So
yeah, I just think when it comes down to it, Utah's going to have the more efficient shooting. They're probably going to be more prominent in the paint. I'd go Utah.
I would lean the same way. I would probably say Utah in 7 there, possibly 6. It really depends on the health of C.J. McCollum. I'd say if we get a healthy McCollum, I'm going to go Utah in 7. But depending on his health, I could see it going 6 even. Because if it's a Dame Lillard one-man show, that's not good for the Trailblazers. That's not what they need because he can only carry them for so long. And
This is true.
where else is the scoring going to come from? I love Jake Layman. I'm one of the number 1 people on the Jake Layman fan club bus, but it's going to be hard.
They're going to be leaning on Rodney Hood and Enes Kanter for their secondary scoring.
And I'm actually of the
that's
mindset
scary.
that the Nurkic injury, they can get 80% of
2 former Jazz players, by the way.
Yep. But I think they could get 80% of what they were getting from Nurkic with Kanter and Collins because Kanter isn't going to give you anything defensively, but Nurkic really wasn't going to give you much defensively either, and Kanter's a pretty well-polished offensive player. Collins is athletic enough to defend the rim a little bit, and he's at least going to be feisty coming off the bench. I don't think that's going to be the injury that kills them per se. I think it really comes down to C.J. McCollum here.
Yeah, I think Nurkic is more of a Swiss Army knife in that Kanter he's a scorer. He's a bona fide scorer, and he gets some offensive boards. But I think even on offense, there's something to his pace. There's something to his ability to set screens and space the floor that, offense is just, when he's a cog of their offense, they just don't move with smoothness. I don't know. I think Nurkic, he knew when to dominate and when not to dominate with that team, and he had a better flow, a better rhythm with those players, that starting unit. I think Kanter can put up big numbers, but I don't think it translates to good basketball.
It's an interesting take. I think it's a player, to your point, that is able to do the exact opposite is Steven Adams, where he's able to play within the flow of the offense so well. He doesn't demand the ball in unnecessary situations.
Almost
he can
to a
get
fault
his when he wants, but yeah, it's almost there's times where it's feed that guy more because he's doing work down there right now. But so yeah, I think that's an interesting take because Kanter definitely does put up the numbers, but I guess there's a reason why he's moved around the league so much.
I just watch offense after offense come to a screeching halt when he's in the game, and it's not like he's demanding the ball and handling the ball with a high usage rate. It's just something about the flow of the offense comes to some screeching stop when he's out there.
He would have been great 15 years ago.
Yeah.
He just came in the wrong...
Put him in Denver with that young Melo crew. Oh,
yeah.
He would have been fun to watch. A little chippy, too.
So we'll move to the Eastern Conference now. So as it stands today, we have the Pistons as the 8th seed at 39-41. Behind them, only 1 game back, is the Hornets and the Heat.
They
But
do not deserve to make the playoffs. No offense to either team.
I agree. I would so much rather see the Pistons
A
in
game behind the team that's already 2 games behind 500. I'll pass.
Yeah. Dwayne, I guess the Heat would be cool for the whole Dwayne Wade scenario, storyline, his last season and all, but like I would much rather see the Pistons. We'll start off with the 1-8 matchup, which would be Pistons-Bucks. Any overarching thoughts on this?
I think Detroit could sneak a game.
I agree.
I think they could get one game.
One home game.
Yep.
Where the crowd gets really rowdy.
And
Giannis
the
is
Bucks
missing a
just
couple
don't shoot
shots.
well
Yeah.
from the perimeter.
Yeah. I can see it coming.
Detroit has been interestingly sneaky this year in beating good basketball teams. They're undefeated against Toronto this
and
year.
losing to the bad ones.
Yeah.
They're one of those teams.
Yeah.
It's like they beat the good ones and lose to the
They
bad
have a
ones.
losing record, so losing is in the formula at this point. It's baked into the cookie.
I got to say, of those 3 contenders for the 8 seed too, I would just love to see Blake Griffin in the playoffs. I've made this point a couple of times.
That's the only thing I care about with
I know.
Detroit.
I just want to see superstars in the playoffs, and he's performed like a superstar this season.
Because when it comes down to it, I like the Heat team better than I like Detroit.
Yeah,
I don't like a single soul aside from Blake Griffin in Detroit.
But it's like if you're gonna watch a team lose in 5 regardless, I'd rather watch like one superstar playing hopefully well.
Yeah.
And,
I almost feel equally of Blake as I do of Kemba. It's like aside from Kemba, I could care less about that entire team.
I agree 100%. That's an easy series to wrap up. Bucks in 5, I would say. If the Pistons can sneak a game, we'll see. Moving on to 2-7, we have the Raptors and the Magic. As it stands today, Magic and Nets are tied at 41 and 40, but the Nets own the tiebreaker, so the Nets sit at the 6th seed. That one surprised me. I was very shocked at this late season surge that the Magic have made. What have your thoughts been on?
Yeah, they've established a little core crew with just Fournier and Augustine and Vucevic playing all-time great ball, but like that starting 5 with Terrence Ross then playing the sixth spot, but an essential 30-minute 6-man.
Yeah.
Like they lean heavily on him. Again, back to the Clipper point, that team knows their identity, and they've well overperformed expectations. I think, and despite playing really well against Toronto in the regular season this year, they're gonna get wiped.
I agree.
It might be one of
sweep for
it
me.
might be one of the highest point differential per games of the first round.
I think the Magic are one of like the sweet stories of the NBA this season, and it's all gonna come crashing to a halt right here in the first round because the Raptors just have such a malleable roster where they can play any style of basketball that you want. So if the Magic want to go big, okay, we'll throw Marc Gasol at you and Serge Ibaka. If they want to go small, then we can go small with all of our 3s and 2s. Like, I just love their roster construction to where they can kind of play with anybody out there.
And I'm a little lower on the Raptors than the general consensus is. I have been all year, but I still think that that team as constructed can do great things. But I just think that team in particular right now, they have something to prove with all of the resting of Kawhi, with all of the naysayers now really jumping hard on the Bucks bandwagon. I think they're going to come out in this first round guns blazing, and everyone's just going to play at peak performance.
I think I saw a quote recently from Kyle Lowry saying how like they're really motivated to prove the haters wrong, and he needs to be the number 1 motivator because he has performed awful in the playoffs. In recent
His
history.
record ain't too good.
But that'll be big if they can come out without those playoff demons that have haunted them for these last
And Marc Gasol hasn't played playoff basketball in almost
3 years.
only 3 years. That's it. That was the last time the Grizzlies made the playoffs.
Yeah, remember it was Mike Conley dueling with
Was it Dame?
No, it was the Spurs. It was Mike Conley versus Kawhi Leonard. I remember that was a super exciting first round where Conley was he was having one of those Conley moments where everybody's like, wow, Mike Conley's the most underrated player in the NBA because he does that from time to time.
But that team has the biggest question mark aside from Kawhi and somewhat Serge Ibaka is their playoff experience. And I'm of the opinion that playoff experience isn't everything. It's something. It's not everything. But
they have the experience. It just hasn't been good experience.
Some of the key cogs of that team don't have a lot of playoff experience. Kawhi does, Ibaka does, Gasol has a little bit. Danny Green does, for sure. They're going to lean on Green pretty hard in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see how like the Anunobis and the Siakams and the Van
That's what I'm
Vliets
saying.
perform.
And like the Norman Powells.
Norman Powell,
Like,
and I think
they
he's
have
great, but he
played
falls
in
down the rotation.
But he could be in like come playoff time if he gives them 15 electric minutes off the bench. That could be like a difference maker in one of these close games. So he's a player to watch for sure. I would say moving on. We can move on now because I think we both have pretty similar thoughts on that series. 4-0 sweep by the Raptors, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So moving on, 3 versus 6 would be the 76ers and the Nets. I've been excited for the Nets' playoffs, like their playoff future, but this actually is a matchup that I wouldn't love for them.
No, not at all. I've been championing the Nets virtually all season long. I've been a big fan of the game that they've played the latter half, the entire 2019 latter half of the season. I do not like their matchup against the 76ers. I think the 76ers would put a pretty brutal beat down on the Nets.
Yeah, I agree. It would be they would need Jarrett Allen to come up huge defensively because I could just see the 76ers pounding them inside over and over again and them having no answer for Joel Embiid.
Jarrett Allen finishes really well at the rim. He's a great lob machine, but he hasn't really ever developed he hasn't developed an offensive game either. He doesn't have a go-to post move. He's not a great ball handler. He's not someone that I could depend on for more points than simple lobs. And when Spencer Dinwiddie and D'Angelo Russell are cooking, he's going to get some work. He's going to get 10, 15, maybe 20 points. But otherwise, he's not consistent. I can't depend on that.
Yeah, he's very much just a rim runner at this point in his career. He hasn't really developed much outside.
I mean, even Steven Adams has that hook shot that when all comes down to it, he can resort to that hook.
He's definitely promising. They're definitely promising for in the future.
And I love D'Angelo Russell. I just don't like him in that matchup. They guard the perimeter so well.
It would take like 40-point performances, I think, from D'Angelo Russell.
Which he's been doing lately. But again,
I think it's hard to ask for.
Night, I know. He's been averaging like 25, 7, and 6 since the turn of the new year. So he's been remarkable. But I just think that Philly, they get out on that perimeter and they defend really well. And if they really wanted to and they wanted to put Ben Simmons on D'Angelo Russell, they could silence him.
Yeah, Ben Simmons has the size to where he can guard 1 through 5 basically, and he has the athletic ability to be able to stay with guards, and if they want more speed, they could just go to Jimmy Butler and say, all right, now you follow around Russell.
Yeah, and the Nets would really have to find a way to exploit J.J. Redick in the pick and roll time and time again, and it would take some superb coaching to do so.
Which has been an Achilles heel for the 76ers in the playoffs. You saw the Celtics do it last year, where every time J.J. Redick was in the game, it was Marcus Smart, go post up, and we'll see. So if they're able to find a way to exploit him, that could be a way that they could stay competitive, but otherwise I see this as probably a sweep. Maybe the Nets get 1 game.
I would love to see the Nets get a game. I'm thinking a sweep.
All right, so we're thinking on similar lines there. Moving on to 4-5, our last playoff matchup, we have the Celtics and the Pacers. Once again, I would be kind of disappointed if the East does shake out the way it's shaking out, because I was very excited for a lot of these first-round matchups, but it's just Celtics and Pacers I'm not super excited about when I say that out loud.
I mean, had the Pacers been able to retain Victor Oladipo's services throughout the season, I think that matchup would be a lot more entertaining than it is as it stands at this moment.
But given the Pacers' current roster, it's like I see that as a pretty easy Celtics series. I would honestly prefer if the 76ers played the Pacers and the Celtics played the Nets. I think that would make for a more entertaining first round.
I agree, totally.
It's unfortunate that we're not going to get that, but given that it seems we're going to have Celtics versus Pacers, I think this is going to be a pretty easy series win for the Celtics. I would say probably 4-1, 4-2. 4-2 is probably stretching it. I would say 4-1. I just don't see where the Pacers are going to get their scoring from this series. It's like they're going to need monster games out of Sabonis and Turner, and I don't see Turner having that offensive output.
Yeah, my big question with the Pacers is Bogdanović, who's played so well in the absence of Victor Oladipo.
And I mean that Cavaliers series last year, he was on fire.
Yeah, and he learned how to play defense from having to get matched up against LeBron every postseason. And he was
embracing it.
Exactly, and now he's been a consistent source of 20-point-per-game scoring with efficient shooting from the perimeter and in the paint. He's tougher than most people give him credit for. He's willing to put his head down and drive and get the hard buckets. He's a good free throw shooter.
People hear the European name and they just assume soft, but that's definitely not the case with Bogdanovic.
Absolutely, and I like the way that Pacers team is constructed. And I've said it a few times in the podcast already, that team has an identity. It knows where it's going for its buckets. They play well in the paint. They've got an interior presence in Sabonis, who on any given night could offensively explode. And Turner's expanding his range in his game a little bit. That they're deep. The Pacers are a lot better with their second unit than a lot of playoff teams are at this point. Teams, especially in the Western Conference, like the Jazz and the Trailblazers, who are really weak after their first unit leaves the floor. But I just don't think that the Pacers match up well against the Celtics. I think also that the Celtics take it in 5.
I think with the Pacers, they have a lot of people that you would be happy if they were like your third best player on your team, on like a championship team, or even like second maybe in Sabonis' case. But they don't have that like true superstar that in the playoffs we've seen time and time again. It's just so valuable, where like the sum of the parts is only so great. Where in the playoffs, when it comes down to it, you need that guy in the fourth quarter that can just take over a game. It's why teams like the Raptors of recent and the Hawks, when they had their time at the top of the Eastern Conference, it's why they were never able to succeed, because they just don't have that top talent star power.
That said, if the Pacers were to take the Celtics 7 games, I wouldn't be surprised.
No,
especially given the Celtics, the season that the Celtics have had, and the fact that the Celtics, their main problem is the exact opposite of how the Pacers play their ball. The Celtics, even though they should, in the biggest of moments, just give the ball to Kyrie. They should always.
Marcus Smart loves him a contested 3.
And then Jason Tatum never establishes his rhythm early in the game, and he essentially just sits on the 3-point line and does nothing. That team doesn't have an identity despite the plethora of talent that it has on its roster.
Despite having like a really great, well-regarded coach, too.
Yeah.
It's very surprising that they've never been able to come to that, because people have just been saying all year, like, wait for playoffs. It's like, well, you guys haven't shown it to us really all year. Why would we be excited about you guys in the playoffs?
Is the measure of a coach his ability to get players to fall in line with his system, or can a coach only be judged by his players' willingness to abide by the system? Because it's clear that the young players in Boston, they want their time to shine, regardless of if Brad says, Jalen, I need you coming off the bench, and I need you in a role of 3-and-D. Jason, I need you as our second option on offense, and Terry, I need you coming off the bench, running the point. All of them want their moment to shine. They don't want to play the roles that they've been given time and time again, which is why in the last quarter of the season, the Celtics are still experimenting with lineup changes. They still don't have a clear-cut starting 5. And if that team would just be willing to put their egos aside and play roles, they could be playing championship basketball. But at the same time, you have to understand their selfishness, because, I mean, no one's going to make that money for you.
Yeah, they're young players on rookie contracts looking to get a second deal.
So in an aspect, you have to be knowledgeable of just building your brand and building your star as a player. You have to give yourself options, and by scoring 10 points per game on efficient shooting, you're not necessarily doing that. But
from a coaching standpoint, do you then go and coach your team maybe not necessarily the right way to play basketball just to keep your superstars happy? It's like there's a very fine line to go there, because it's like, all right, he starts giving them more ISO opportunities and like draws up more plays for Jason Tatum early, but it's going against like the flow of the offense per se. So it's like I can see why it's been such a troubling season for them, because it's balancing a very fine line.
What I think works in the Celtics' favor is the fact that they play really, really good defense.
Yeah.
And that's going to translate really well into the playoffs. And when teams resort to ISO a little more often, I'll take the Celtics ISO over most teams.
Mhm.
I think when the game slows down, Kyrie, Jason Tatum, Terry Rozier, they're still all great options to go get a bucket, better than most 3 options on most teams. And so for some reason, I just feel like despite all the tumultuousness in that locker room, I feel like when the offense breaks down and they just need a bucket and they just need a stop, the Celtics will still be able to be that team to provide that bucket and provide that stop.
And that's something that Brad Stevens has always brought as a defensive identity too. So it's interesting to see how this will play out. But I would agree with your point. They've always been a good defensive team, and you can rely on them even if their shots aren't falling to stay in a game through their defense. And like we saw it in the Eastern Conference Finals, Game 7 last year, where they were missing a historic amount of shots, and they were in the game the entire time.
They very rarely get in their own heads, and they very rarely take themselves out of games.
Yeah.
They're fighters. They've really got that pit bull mentality. And
we also saw that last year where it's like Terry Rozier was in Eric Bledsoe's head, and Eric Bledsoe took himself out of the game,
Yep.
whereas Terry Rozier had mental fortitude in that rivalry and was playing some of his best basketball of his
And
career.
Rozier's had an ongoing feud with Philly dating all the way back to last postseason that he hasn't backed down from.
Yeah.
Just keeps yapping. I like that. I like that Boston team that they've got a little bit of everything. They've got the cool veteran leader in Al Horford that's going to be able to keep the troops just contained and calmed. But at the same time, they've got a couple enforcers. They've got Marcus Smart. They've got Marcus Morris, a couple dudes that are just willing to throw their bodies out there. And I like that, again, when playoff basketball slows down, a team like Philly, who I've really liked a lot this year, and I like the way they're constructed, they're a team that seems to crumble in the biggest moments. And when they need a stop, they don't seem to get it. And when they need a big bucket from Embiid, he seems to just shut down.
It has happened over and over again, and that's why I think I watched a Sunday showcase game towards the end of the season, and it was a 76ers versus Celtics game, and it was really the 76ers' first big win over the Celtics, where Joel Embiid said after the game he wanted to go out and show that he's the most dominant player in the NBA, and a lot of people ran with that comment, but I think that could be important for a 76ers team because you're right, they've crumbled a lot of times.
They just did again the other night against the Bucks. They were carrying something like a 10-point lead into the fourth quarter, and they ended up losing by 12.
Yeah.
They just threw it down to Embiid in the post in the moments where they needed a bucket, and the Bucks went on a 22-point run.
And I think that's because a lot of it has to do with Ben Simmons still can't shoot. And when your point guard can't shoot and a defense can just collapse on you in tight fourth quarters
they're
they're just
predictable.
going to turn the ball over and over again.
That's where I think Tobias Harris becomes the biggest X factor for that team, because otherwise Ben Simmons, J.J. Redick, Joel Embiid, they're predictable, and you know what you're going to get from them in the final minutes of the game. If Tobias can get to the line, hit some free throws, hit a couple big threes, maybe have an interior and mid-range presence, that's really the X factor that's going to keep the opposing defenses guessing. Because Joel is, again, he's predictable. He goes into the post and he does the same moves almost every time. He has great handles, but you see it coming from a mile away.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how it turns out. He's very predictable, but at the same time it's like Shaq was kind of predictable, but he was also kind of unstoppable. Joel Embiid is getting there. He's not there yet, but he is getting there to where he is predictable, but at the same time it's like, all right, well then try and stop me because I'm 7 feet and 300 pounds almost. And
Joel just doesn't impose his will the way Shaq does. Giannis is
but
much.
I feel like when he's playing at his best, he does.
He does, but just the fact that Shaq would take one step and he's dunking the ball every time. He just threw that body around, and he caught the ball so much lower in the post than Embiid. Embiid likes to catch it at that 18-foot shoulder and then drive towards the hoop, and he's good at it.
That's kind of another structure of their offense too, because they have him stand at the 3-point line a lot, and he's been vocal about the fact that he doesn't even really want to do that. He'd rather just sit down in the post and be a traditional center, I think. But because Ben Simmons can't shoot, sometimes they need their center to space out for them and take a couple of threes. It's crazy to me that they have to rely on Joel Embiid for 3-point shooting instead of Ben Simmons.
And Ben Simmons doesn't even need to develop a 3-point shot just get a consistent mid-range jumper. You
Just
have to
the
be a
threat of
threat
taking a shot.
outside of laying the ball up.
I mean, like when the Warriors versus Grizzlies series a couple years back when Tony Allen was on the Grizzlies and the Warriors infamously just decided to guard him with their center and not even guard him. And it's like that's what teams are doing with the 76ers. Teams are not even guarding Ben Simmons. They're putting their center on him and it's just saying, "All right, come to the paint and try layup over our center," because odds are you're probably going to miss that.
If he could just get one dribble move, a quick hesitation, and a pull-up, he's got the height. He'll shoot over anyone's head, and he's quick. He's athletic.
Crazy ball handles. He has so many raw skills.
Just make the defense respect you.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
Well, it's going to be an exciting playoffs. Before we tune out, do you want to just give your predictions? Who's coming out of the East? Who's coming out of the West?
I've been pretty cemented in my predictions for the last couple months. I don't foresee any big changes coming anytime soon outside of injuries, and there have been some. But regardless, the Warriors in the West, and I'm riding with Milwaukee in the East.
Man, I really wanted to ride Milwaukee, and then it's like, by Nico Mirotic, by Malcolm Brogdon. It's just been like injury after injury that's
I know.
hit them. And
I think
so bad because they've had such a good season. And
there's still the potential that Brogdon comes back for like the last series or two, and so long as they get him back, I'm not so much worried about Mirotic as I am Brogdon. If they don't get Brogdon back in the playoffs at all, that definitely
that's a big loss for them.
That changes everything for sure. And I might consider a Philly or a Toronto in that case. Mm-hmm. But all other things equal, I'm going Milwaukee. They've just been a damn near unstoppable presence this entire season.
I've loved watching them. I've like I said, I really wanted to pick them. I if they didn't have those injuries, they probably would have been my pick, but going in, I'm going to go Warriors in the West. I think that's easy. And then Raptors in the East. I've been pretty high on them all season. I loved the Kawhi Leonard acquisition, and I think that's going to really pay dividends in a playoff environment where, like, they have all these shaky players in the playoffs. When they're able to turn to the right and see a calm presence like Kawhi just doing his thing, I think that'll be a really big impact on them to have somebody like that.
Yeah, and it might actually encourage him to stay in Toronto following the season.
It's been really interesting that he's just like gotten a pass all season for not playing back-to-backs, not doing like this, and then not talking to like the reporters about what his plans are next season. And like Toronto fans are all in on this guy, so like it's kind of been interesting. It's like it's not really been widely reported. Like nobody knows what he's gonna do
because he's a nice guy. People like Kawhi. He doesn't talk about flat Earth or anything.
Yeah, it's true. It's like people liked Tim Duncan.
Uh-huh.
But you know what? On that note, I hope you guys enjoy the last 2 days of the NBA regular season. I hope you're as excited for playoffs as we are, and I hope you guys enjoyed our little playoff review show. We'll be back again next week for some more NBA news, and until then, hope you guys have a good week.